Hello, Clive and Carle here, and I'm with my wonderful son Jack, and we thought we'd have a chat about pain and how to relieve it and hopefully get rid of it permanently. So, Jack, you've had quite a lot of experience getting people out of pain. What's your favourite? The Tesla device, the magnesium, the magic chair?
I think it depends, or certainly in my experience, it's depended on the person that's coming to me with the pain. I would say the most efficient way that I've found personally is with the Tesla device. The Tesla device, even the most sceptical person can't deny whether they are or aren't in pain. So
Yes, yeah.
I often get people from all kinds of walks of life come into the office, be that physios or everyday human beings, just doing whatever they want. And often it's followed by the designated taxi driver on the day, be that their negative husband or curious wife that has very little interest or knowledge in the thing that their partner is buying. And as an example, recently I had a lovely couple come to me wanting to buy a Tesla device, specifically the wife. And the husband was incredibly uncomfortable with the whole situation. You could tell that he had little or no interest in what his wife was doing and thought she was a lunatic. And as the day progressed, I started to ask her, what is the reason for you buying this device? What are you looking at doing? And she was a physio, and she wanted to add it to her already successful business. Her husband, on the other hand, worked 6 months of the year on an oil rig. So he was quite stoic, he was Latvian, there was not a lot of emotion in his tone other than kind of simmering rage, I would say.
I wonder which 6 months she prefers.
Yeah. So I said to him, are you in any pain? And he kind of gruffly tells me, he's like, no, I don't want to be touched with this thing. I don't agree with this. I'm not happy with this. I was like, no, understood, no problem at all. And I go on and start talking to his wife about the machine and what it can do and how it can be integrated into her business. And all of a sudden I can tell that he's starting to get a little bit curious. And he says, well, okay, I do have some pain in my knee. And it turns out that some pain was actually quite deep, like utter agony in his knee.
Wow.
Where he couldn't really bend it.
Whoa.
So it was just, walking was a pain. So I said, well, let me treat you very, very quickly and unobtrusively, and we'll just see what you think. So I treat his knee with a deep tissue electrode for about 5 minutes. And I stopped and I said, how are you feeling? He said, It doesn't say very much. And I was like, okay, a little bit odd, but I'm going to go back to talk to the wife. Anyway, 5 or 10 minutes later, I can see in the corner of my eye, and he's just going like this. He's just going, shaking his head. And I've not said anything. And then his wife looked over and said, everything okay? He's like, no pain. I've got no pain in my knee whatsoever. Mm. And that was someone that was super skeptical. And I always think, well, how much is it mind over matter, right? So how much are you willing something to work? Whereas in this case, this guy was entirely convinced it wasn't going to work, and it was some kind of weird witchcraft device. And it still had a super effect. And needless to say, they bought a machine and they were delighted and have been ever since. But that's why I love the Tesla machines, is because there is no doubting whether or not you are or aren't in pain. And as many things as there are, such as magnesium and the pain genie and the rapid relief and the magic chair, for me, I feel most confident treating someone with the Tesla device knowing that I'm 99.9% positive I'm going to get a good result.
Yeah.
What about you and your experience?
Well, for the skeptical, I love to say, look, this machine doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. It's still going to work. Yeah. Do you want to show that one to the camera? Yeah. And
this is one of Dad's much more fancy devices. You can tell this is an absolute work of art, in and out. And what kind of results have you had that have shocked you in the past with Tesla devices?
I've seen people, let's say they haven't had feeling in their feet for some reason, usually surgery or something, for 10 years. I've seen a few people, suddenly they got their feeling back. I mean, the effect of pumping electrons into the body, which really, it does many things, but one of the things it does is it's an electron generator, and it's like, being barefoot on the ground, you're getting a few electrons, but this is pumping in like tens of thousands of times that. So, what happens when we eat well, good nutrition or supplementation if that's needed, what happens is our cells can now work properly. They become fully charged because we're electrical beings, and that's the purpose of nutrition, to charge up the cells with energy. So this is the same, except you're cutting out the middleman. You're just charging the cells up with energy without the nutrition. Now, obviously, without the nutrition long term, the problem might come back. But the fastest result I ever saw was 10 seconds. I had another 10-second one actually a couple of weeks ago at the Barbara O'Neill event. I've had people who've, for instance, had lockjaw, just unable to speak. And I've put the general purpose electrode, a bit like this, on their cheek. And within 10 seconds, I've had it happen a few times, suddenly it's done. That was all they needed, a charge of electrons.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, they are amazing.
Another thing that I found with the Tesla device that I think for those expecting immediate results with the more deep-rooted issues, I think this can be disappointing until you realize the power that it can have. And I'll give you a perfect example of what I mean by that is that I can't use this device and fix your broken bone. But what I can do is give your body the tools to do it as quickly as humanly possible. And my now soon-to-be wife had crippling arthritis in her knee. And when we first got together, it was quite worrying because she couldn't really put bare weight on it, right? So over the course of about 6 weeks, I started treating her with the device. And because she was unable to do the physio due to the inflammation around the knee, it meant that it just disintegrated to basically nothing. It was just bone on bone. It would have this horrible click. And it was agony, especially in sharp weather changes. It would swell up, or it would go really cold and really stiff and really uncomfortable. So the idea of bearing a child for 9 months was absolutely harrowing, as you can imagine. So what we did was we would treat her knee for about 7 minutes ago. It would reduce the inflammation around the knee and the joint, and it would give her the tools for her to start doing the physio. So it means she had 15 to 20 minutes of pain-free relief, and then slowly she started to rebuild her knee because we were able to remove the pain for short bursts until her body was able to recover itself, as properly as it possibly could, whilst doing the proper steps like the physio and walking and bearing weight without pain. So all of her gait started to change. She was able to carry Ted, your grandson, my son, up the stairs without pain, walk, run, do all the exercises again. But she wouldn't have been able to do that if she hadn't have been used with the Tesla device.
How long has she been bad for?
Well, she fell down the drain, and that ruined one knee, and her other knee was already bad. I would say probably for 5 years or so.
Wow.
So she basically had 2 bad knees, if you remember.
Yeah.
So to go from barely being able to bear weight to being able to walk, pain-free or not, was a massive jump. But then to be going pain-free throughout pregnancy was, life-changing. So what I'm saying is, as amazing as this machine is for things like a twisted ankle or a sore back or a locked joint, which you can get rid of almost immediately, it can fix or at least help fix the more deep-rooted issues, which I think people would take for granted. Just worth noting, I thought.
Right, very interesting. So, I discovered this technology about 20 years ago when a medical doctor I was working with explained to me that this was normal, that Guy's Hospital opened their electrotherapy department in 1843, which is a long time before the drug thing really started. And it's been written out of history because this is a 100-year-old piece of kit or some age like that. And while obviously all the ones we have are fully restored, it doesn't suit the industry to have a machine that lasts 100 years and is still working as well as it did on the day that it was new.
Well, especially if you're a doctor and you can make a lot of money on a direct debit of pain relief using oil-based pharmaceutical drugs. If you can get a client come in and get rid of that pain immediately, financially that is going to disrupt the big pharmaceutical companies.
Back in the day, in the 1920s, people were buying these to use at home if they could afford them. Dentists use them, doctors use them. They were all over the place, but they were deliberately, at the end of the Second World War, they'd rewritten the medical books, and they no longer taught herbalism and acupuncture and whatever else they might have taught. Certainly not electrotherapy. Although, funnily enough, the surgeons still use a version of this original Tesla technology in eye surgery, for instance. When they cut the eye, they don't really want to use a scalpel, no matter how sharp, because of bleeding. So they use cautery, which is using this type of technology to cut, and it seals the blood vessels as it cuts, because you don't want blood in the eye. So, but they don't know that if they just, if you like, turn the machine the other way around, they could heal rather than cut.
And out of all the machines that we use, how easy would you say the Tesla is for the layman, for the very uninitiated, to get a machine, unwrap it, and go to town with it?
Well, the first time I bought one, basically you only had one knob, like a volume knob. And the first time I used it, I had about 10 minutes instruction over the phone about how to turn the knob and how to work out, if you use too much power, the person will say, well, that's a bit much, and you turn it down a bit.
Yeah.
It's not difficult, right? So the very first client I ever had was actually my next door neighbour, and he'd got some sort of whiplash injury or something. He hadn't been able to drive for 3 months because of his neck. Very first time I used a machine ever, fixed him. He was fixed. I mean, not temporarily, but permanently.
Because I would agree, it seems to be a really intuitive device.
Oh, yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, if I can pick it up and use it, I genuinely do believe anyone can. What I found, do you remember when you gave me this? So the first time I ever had a machine, I can openly say I was not the most awake person. I was very fortunate that I was able to listen to you and have you always on in the background, so I kind of understood the other side of life. But I think at that point in my life, I was very much about, okay, I must pay my taxes, I must go to the doctors, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get married, I'm going to do this, just very, very straight down the line. And I remember you gave me one of these devices during COVID, and you said, all I ask is if you do use it, just let me know how you get on. And I promise you, I tucked it under my sofa for 2 months, and I genuinely thought I was never going to use it. Until my best friend Fred came over, and it was during the eat out to help out period of time, and we were going to go and get a pizza and a couple of beers. So the first time in what must have been a year or a year and a half. And as he came up the stairs, which were precarious, if you remember my flat, they were steep and narrow, he'd rolled his ankle on the way, so I lived about 10-15 minutes walk out of town. So when he got to the top, he said, there's no way I can go out. So I laughed at that, thinking I will carry you out if I have to. We're going out regardless. I've not seen any sort of humanity for far too long. But I did remember that Dad had given me this device. So I thought, okay, well, at least I can give him an electric shock. If I'm totally honest, it was a masochist kind of thing for me. I just wanted to see how
That's
it worked.
not very nice.
No, but friends for 15-20 years, it's always a bit of a laugh, especially an electric shock. So I treat him with I kind of plug it in, and I put the deep tissue electrode in, which is, I think you've shown a second ago, and I start treating his ankle. And instead of getting this shock, he says it's quite a pleasant experience, which again, disheartening for me. And then I start treating his knee, and then I start to think, okay, well, maybe I'm going to just continue. Thinking in my head, there's no way this is going to work. And after about 5 minutes or so, I say, how do you feel? And he says, do you know what? I've got to admit, there is no pain. I said, well, time is the greatest healer. It has been several minutes since you've rolled your ankle. You are a grown man. You're probably fine. And the machine probably had nothing to do with it, just simply time. But just in case, I wanted to treat his back, because he'd always had lower back pain, and he'd moaned about it since I'd known him. And I said, how is your back out of 10 at the moment, Fred? And he went, I don't know, like a dull ache, 4, 5 out of 10. So enough to annoy you, but not to kind of batter you to the floor. So I start treating his back, and I said, how does your back feel? And he says, my back's better. And I thought, you bastard has lied to me for 15 years about invisible back pain. That was my first thought was, I can't believe you've been such a drama queen for 15 years. Back under the sofa, don't think about it. Then I meet Rachel a few months later, and as she's coming back up those steep, narrow stairs, she rolls her knee and it locks into that place. And this time, I've reached for the machine instinctively. So not for a laugh or just to see if it works. Instinctively, I've gone for the machine, and I never do stuff like that. And I like I said, I was not awake at this point. I just thought, I've seen it work, I guess subconsciously, so I'm going to use this. I treated her knee, and it literally went from being 90-degree locked to straight in about 7 minutes. And she was out of pain from crying with agony to not in pain. And that was just a bang. This huge light switch went off. And now I'm in a very fortunate position where we're able to put these into people's houses and make a tangible difference. But the consistency in results for me is such a shock, considering it is a plug, a choice of electrode, and a dial that you turn. To be able to make that kind of tangible difference in terms of someone's pain is quite crazy, I think.
There's nothing like it. No matter how modern the other machines maybe that are around, I've never seen anything that works as well as an original device invented by Nikola Tesla in the 1880s, 1890s. The ones that I restore mainly are from the 1920s, and if people do want one, they just need to contact me, Clive at secrethealthclub.com, and I can happily tell you what we've got available. You were mentioning about instant straightening of a knee. As you know, the first time I got interviewed by Crow, if you haven't found him, he's Crow777. He has an interesting podcast. When the first time he interviewed me, he'd got trigger finger. His finger was stuck like that, and he explained that his sister had just had an operation some weeks ago, and she was still recovering from it. And I said, well, look, take some magnesium. I'd posted him some, so he had some. So go and take some right now. Get a glass of water and take some. He probably maybe took 3 or something like that. I can't remember how many. And it was a 2-hour interview. Halfway into the interview, his finger straightened, just like that. Because, the first thing to try before you try a Tesla machine is just try magnesium. Because for a lot of people, magnesium is the reason they're in pain in the first place. The reason that the body hasn't been able to get them out of pain.
Well, nothing depletes magnesium more than stress. And I think we do live in a world entirely full of stress. Every single part of life seems to be some sort of stressful thing. So if your body hasn't got the magnesium in it to start treating itself, naturally people are going to start to fall apart.
Yeah, well, they're going to get anxious because, magnesium is the mineral of relaxation. It relaxes hearts. In the emergency room, somebody's having a heart attack, they inject you with magnesium. A few seconds later, the heart is eased and relieved. But it's amazing. And, I'm low on magnesium. Everybody, I would say, virtually everybody, is not just stress in the form of listening to the news or something, but stress in other ways. For every molecule of sugar that you eat, you need 50 molecules of magnesium to deal with it.
Yeah. And
most people, whether it's too much carbs or whatever it is, are one way or another getting more sugar than at least our ancestors would have naturally had. So, if you have restless leg, muscle cramps, twitches, constipation, heart arrhythmia, anxiety, worry, epileptic fits, headaches, migraines, and there are a number of other things, first of all, consider magnesium. If I could only recommend one health product out there, it would be magnesium, because I've seen it. I've seen people who are suicidal become not suicidal in a couple of days. People in pain get out of pain. In some cases, it depends the cause. That day or 20 minutes later.
Yeah, I find it's really for me. I'm in a bit of a fortunate position where I eat quite well, and I feel like I am looking after my body in terms of not taking in too much sugar, making sure that my diet is at least as good as it possibly can be. But when I do sport, I notice that I get aches, and I did put that down to me being a little bit older than I was when I could play 90 minutes of football without any ill effects. Now I do suffer with aches, and I can have a little bit of post-workout DOMS, if you like. With the spray, I find it's super fast, as in my body absorbs it super quickly to the point where my aches are gone within about 10 to 15 minutes. I feel back to normal. And considering I climbed the 3 peaks last year with little to no training,
in less than 24 hours.
In less than 24 hours, the only thing I took was your energy blend and the magnesium spray. That's the only thing I took with me up those mountains. That and a can-do attitude.
Because the trick is to use the magnesium prior to getting the aches. Rub it in before you do the exercise, as well as perhaps after if you need it.
Yeah. But no, I agree. It's a wonderful thing.
So, there are so many other remedies for aches or pains. Obviously one of the big ones is why is it being caused in the first place? Are you eating an inflammatory food? There's always a cause. It's not like you catch pain or got a bad case of pain today. something's causing it. Could be toxic poisoning, definitely going to be nutrient deficiency, or both. So we do on the website the 30-day rejuvenation pack, which most people, if they're feeling under the weather, it's got the 10 important things that, I don't know, 90% of people need. Maybe it's even higher than that. So in a few days you can notice the difference. There's one last device, loads of devices I could show you, but people really like this one, and it vibrates very, very fast. You can possibly hear that. And let's say somebody's got an aching wherever it is in their body, you can just rest it against the body. You don't have to push or anything. And it's called rapid release because that's exactly what it can do. And there are various different heads for different sized bits of the body you might want to go into. But people need to understand that there are so many fantastic devices out there, old and new, where people are now currently taking drugs or having surgery when they're just blissfully unaware, unfortunately their doctors too are blissfully unaware, that alternative treatments exist outside of the medical profession as such. And, why suffer? I've tried suffering, I've tried being depressed. Absolute waste of time, I can just tell you. No point doing it.
It's good advice.
So perhaps in another one we'll do some of the other devices, because it's incredible. People need to know that things like incontinence, there's a device to fix that. I've had people fixed in 30 minutes. It's just incredible. That doesn't happen with everybody. There are devices for trauma release, which reset the nervous system, which I've seen people who've literally arrived in a wheelchair and walked out because what their problem was trauma. I had one lady who said, her daughter had died years ago, and then 1 year later she got motor neuron disease, and it was clear there'd be a link, right, an emotional link. She cleared the trauma literally in half an hour. And the great thing about relieving trauma is, unlike supplements where you may need to do it every day or every week, whatever it is, if you release a trauma, it's released forever. It's not like you have to come back for another go. It's not like, Freudian type work. You fix a trauma, and a lot of people are ill not because of just nutrient deficiency, but because something terrible happened in the past and they've never been able to get shift it from the body. Yeah. So we can talk about that next time.
Emotional and physical trauma, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for watching.